edition of Real Talk Straight Talk. Once again, welcome to another edition of Real Talk Straight Talk. I don't know what to say. It's beautiful whenever I have ladies in the house, and
Nice.
I know that's the man in me. Welcome our special guest, and you're not a guest anymore.
No, I guess I'm not.
No, you're a co-host.
Right.
So welcome, Peggy Sadler. Welcome to Real Talk Straight Talk.
Well, thanks for having me, Colin. Really excited to be here.
You know, I saw you on Sunday, and it was great to see you at the Black Love event at the Aeolian Hall. This past Sunday, I must say, special shout out to the Wayne Community Center for showcasing its conversation on Black Love. And that came about because in 1927, the Aeolian Hall was the first place that the Canadian version of the NAACP took place.
Okay.
So they had the event on Sunday. Peggy was there. I got to say a special shout out. Thank you for being there. I get to say that because I was part of the group with Pastor Thomas that put this on.
Okay.
So once again, big shout outs to the Wayne Community Center. You know, I always have to
Nice.
say stuff about our sponsors, RBC, Pride, the Fix Hair Salon where we're shooting tonight. So once again, special thank you to Angel. Also got to say a special thank you to Puta, who's the Up Like 7 Barbershop. We also shoot there as well. We've had an episode on politics and the upcoming elections. You and I talked a little bit about how to encourage people to vote and all that, and we try to get a few statistics and stuff. I think we'll try to get into that a little bit later. But Peggy is the first candidate that accepted our invitation. I believe next week we have a few more people that are coming on, so thankfully, and I think Peggy's the catalyst. So once again, thank you for accepting our invitation. I want to get into you and your time in politics. How long have you been in politics?
Well, I actually ran for the school board back in 2000. I was a trustee on the Thames Valley District School Board. So that was 13 years on the school board. And then from 2013 to today, I have been an MPP at the provincial level. But actually, long before that, I was a staff person, both at on Parliament Hill back in the late 1980s, and then at Queen's Park. I worked in a minister's office during when the NDP formed government in Ontario from 1990 to 1995. So I've had a lot of experience, both as a staff person, and then school board trustee, and then MPP.
Wow, that's 19. Did you say 1995?
Yeah, well, in the late 1980s, I was a staffer on Parliament Hill. Then in the early 1990s, I was a staffer at Queen's Park, and then more than 13 years on the school board, and then almost 9 years as an MPP.
How do you like being an MPP?
It has its challenges. I won't deny that, but it's incredibly rewarding when you can actually make a difference for either an individual person that you're helping get the service or program or support that they need, and also at the policy level. Like one of the things that I am proudest of that I worked on at Queen's Park was paid leave for employees who experience domestic violence or sexual violence. So I brought in a private member's bill to change the Employment Standards Act so that workers who experience domestic or sexual violence can take time off of work without risking their job, so that they can see a doctor, get counseling, find a new place to live, these kinds of things. And as a result of my private member's bill, the government of the day, that was when the Liberals were government, they picked it up and they made that change in the legislation, and the Conservatives, when they were elected, they kept it. So that is law in the province of Ontario, and that was something that was really meaningful for me and that I really pushed hard for.
What came to light for you to come up with this policy or this bill? Like, what is this, like a personal or element, or is this something where people from the community were sharing their narratives about being being fired from a job or being terminated, and then they're dealing with the emotional turmoil of domestic violence, but then also they're dealing with the financial element. So how did that get you started? Like, how did that highlight? Where was that aha moment for you?
Well, you know, as a young woman, I identified myself as a feminist, and the issue of violence against women was something that brought me involved in politics, because I saw the need for political change to deal with violence against women. And at Western University there's a research institute called the Center for Research and Education on Violence Against Women and Children, and they worked with the Canadian Labour Congress, and they did a big research report showing how violence follows women in particular, because women are the ones who are most likely to experience domestic or sexual violence, but how that violence follows those employees into the workplace. So sometimes it can be their abuser is waiting outside in a parking lot, their abuser is calling the workplace and insisting that they be able to talk to this person. So they did a survey on of employees across the country on their how violence impacts the workplace, and they found that it does have a very direct effect. And so this was legislation that came out of that research report, because oftentimes it's the fear of losing the financial security that keeps or prevents somebody from leaving an abusive relationship.
Yeah, exactly.
And so if we can make sure that people don't have to fear losing their job, if they disclose that they've had an experience of violence and they need to deal with it in whatever way that is, they don't have to worry that they're going to be terminated from their employment as a result.
I'm going to look at it. I'm going to go through. Thank you for doing this, because it's amazing to empower women to also, and men who I don't want to make employees. I don't want to make any assumptions. However, how do you support, are there any distinctions of supporting women of color or newcomers who are being in a domestic violence situation? Like, how do you support, or how do people who are newcomers who are dealing with domestic violence, or people in various communities, visible minorities or communities, how do you support them? Or how do you distinguish the ones who are women of color? Like, is there a distinction between, who's part of the support? Is it the police coming to support? Is it social workers? And how is the process for people to get that support? Is it accessible, and do people still stray away from it?
Yeah, that's a good question, and certainly what I have, I was a researcher before I was elected too, so that may not.
Yeah, so I want to know, because a lot of times when people always focus on a certain demographic, it's usually a white woman that they're usually focusing. So then where is the distinction of supporting women of color in who are I'm focusing on women. I know we're supposed to be talking about gender neutral or whatever, but I'm focusing on my own experience. How do you support women of color to ensure that they feel safe in a society that always just enforces the status quo and doesn't necessarily support women of color? Yeah.
So one of the things that I have learned from talking to organizations and advocates, allies for people of color, is that we really need to deal with the Employment Standards Act. Because that is where racialized people are the ones who are less likely to be in unions.
Yes.
They rely almost entirely on the protections of the Employment Standards Act. And so it was important to make that change in the Employment Standards Act, because that provides those, that access to paid sick days for anybody.
Yes.
And we know that it's mostly racialized people who rely on the Employment Standards Act for workplace protections. Same thing with minimum wage. Like the NDP is really pushing hard for a $20 minimum wage by 2026, because we know that minimum wage workers are predominantly racialized, often women. Same thing with paid sick days. That's another cause that I have really been involved with and pushed hard for at Queen's Park, because racialized workers are the least likely to have access to paid sick days from their employer.
Exactly. So that's where I'm looking about as having access, and then and the transparency to have access to this information, or what are the protocols and the policies, because a lot of times people in the communities do not know that they actually have access to this.
Yeah.
Right? So then how do we, like right now, this is the first time I'm hearing about it. So then again, like how would I support other women or other people who are also going through this situation, and to, you know, to basically be an ally in a sense to help them and to and advocate as well.
Yeah, it is a problem that and it's the same with tenants, and housing is a whole other issue that we can talk about.
Yes.
But workers in Ontario many times don't know the rights that and protections that they have under the Employment Standards Act. But right now, if you are employed in Ontario in any workplace and you experience domestic or sexual violence, your employer is legally required to provide you with paid sick days or paid leave, so that you can deal with anything to do with your experience. And we really pushed hard to make sure that you didn't have to provide evidence of a police report, for example.
Yeah, that's another element, because again, the relationships with various communities and the police, then again, are we making more of a challengers, or are you creating more barriers but not really supporting? So that's a question I would have.
No requirement for a police report. And it's the same thing, when we've been talking about paid sick days, we are very clear that there should not be a requirement for a doctor's note.
Good.
That, you know, an employee who needs access to paid, ideally, and the government has not moved on this, but this is what we would like to see, is permanent paid sick days, where you don't have to show proof like a doctor's note, but there has to be an element of respect between the employer and
privacy as well.
Yeah, exactly. And if a worker needs a personal emergency leave day because they are ill, because a child is ill, for whatever the reason, we believe that they should have access to those paid sick, or we call them paid sick days, but they're actually called technically personal emergency leave days. But the NDP is pushing for that to be made permanent in the Employment Standards Act, so that every worker in Ontario can have that right to be able to use those days for personal emergencies.
Right, that's amazing. And then that's something too within our community, that we'll start having to share this information with various communities that we are connected with, to let them know that they have access to this. Because again, for me, this is the first time I'm hearing about it. So again, it's just neat to know how we can support everybody else. But
but just to be clear, so the paid days for sexual violence, domestic violence is in the law.
Good.
Paid sick days, not in the law yet.
Not yet. Not
working
yet.
on it. Working on it.
Temporary days are available. Temporary COVID-related days are there, but they're going to expire in July. But the NDP is not going to stop until we get that permanent.
That's awesome.
In a little bit, I want to talk about the NDP's platform, and then I want to talk about your personal stuff.
Sure.
I want to ask, give me some of your highlights. What's the biggest accomplishment that you think you've had being in your position?
Well, the legislature, the paid leave, that for domestic violence, sexual violence meant a lot to me. But just some of the things I've been able to do on behalf of constituents. And I think of, there's a man, George White, lives in Byron, has a very advanced ALS, is in a wheelchair, needs a PSW to transfer him from his wheelchair to his bed morning and night. He spent 3 days in his wheelchair with no PSW coming into the home to transfer him, no toileting, nothing. He was this is inhumane. It is so unacceptable, and I had to raise his story in the legislature, in the media, talk to the minister to get action. But I use George White as an example, but this happens all the time, that I get, somebody contacts my office, they're desperate, they are waiting, I've had calls from, there was a family, the wife was lying in a stretcher in the hallway at LHSC. She had a mental health crisis and was waiting a week in a stretcher in the hallway. And I had to raise this at Queen's Park to get the government, get the hospital, get people, get someone to do something about it, to help that person. So it's a mix of the, what I've been able to do on the legislative front, but also, helping individual people, deal with what they're facing.
So what do you think the challenges are then with the idea of, the person in Byron being at home 3 days without any support, to another individual, being waiting for, a week to, get a bed? So where does that lie? Is that more the federal? Is that more where is that? Is that a funding issue? Is that lack of resources?
So there's a lot of problems in our healthcare system.
That's a system. Yeah. That's a system element.
Yeah. There's a lot of problems. A lot of it has to do with the way that we run our healthcare system. On the PSW side and the home and community care side, we have a privatized system where private sector agencies hire PSWs at abysmally low wages. The PSWs are not paid enough. It's a lousy job, and so as a result, there's a lot of turnover. Yes. And so, but the government has mandated this is how it's got to be run, with these private sector agencies trying to, reduce costs by paying low wages. And the end result is that people...
what you pay for.
Yeah, exactly.
I want to get to the people aspect of this, right? Because in our communities, and I say our community because there's no one black community as many, we don't necessarily pick up and think that we can call our elected officials. And the cases that you mentioned, it's people actually contacting your office.
Yeah.
And I want people to truly understand in our communities, because we don't really think that we can actually call and affect these changes.
True.
Right? And that's something that we need to get out there. And I'm so glad that you brought up
the accessibility, that she's available, but we have to let the community understand that they can call.
Do you think that you are able to get that message out to marginalized communities, racially disparaged communities? Do you think that your office, and not only just your office, but the party in a whole, the NDP party, is able to get that particular message out there that you are that accessible?
Well, this is one of the reasons why I go to events like Black Love, and it's really important that I am in the community so that people see me as someone that they can approach and they feel comfortable with. I'm a member of ACFOLA, the African Canadian Federation of London and Area. I try to attend events where there is going to be members of black communities who are present. But the other thing I just was doing this on the weekend. As candidates, all we do during the campaign is door knock. I was door knocking in a very, very, very low income, marginalized, kind of public housing complex in London West. People, almost every single person who lived there is racialized. But people were so surprised to see me at their door, and so surprised that the candidate of all the doors that I could knock on in London West would go there to hear their stories. These are people who really need a change, they need changes at the government level. And so it's really important for me to be there to hear from them as to, what is the reality of the housing, the quality of the housing that they're living in, the concerns they have about their kids, violence, employment, all of these things. And so, people were really surprised that the candidate would be there, and I wanted to say, like, of course I'm going to be here. This is the role of somebody who wants to represent this community. We have to understand what the issues are if we're going to be an effective representative.
But sometimes it comes across that because our communities don't vote in the way that they should, that the candidates themselves kind of dismiss the communities in that aspect because they're thinking, okay, you know what, I'm not going to get the votes that I think I should, right? And obviously it's wrong. It's not something that should
they
be,
go to everybody goes to
They-
a
they-
Where
designated
there's higher-
area
or a designated area
yeah.
where they know they're going to get that turnout.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
that's why I said, do you
all
think
about numbers.
Do you think the NDP party is able to get that message that you are accessible? Because as I said to you earlier, one of the questions that came up was how the NDP party is perceived. It's perceived more as a middle class party as opposed to a party that will represent the economically disparaged communities.
Yeah.
There's been that, you know, I don't know if it's a misconception, what is it, but it's always been that when, and I'm going to talk about the Caribbean community, whenever we do talk politics, we never really mention NDP. We more mention liberals, right? We mention the PCs a little bit. I think since Jagmeet Singh has been, he's gotten, in certain communities, he's raised the recognition, but when you think of us as black communities, we don't really gravitate so much to the NDP.
How so? I'm going to challenge you. Are you sure about that? Are you making an assumption
I'm
now?
making an assumption on.
What assumption are you
hold
making?
on,
Just
that's
London
what I say.
community? Or Kitchener? Toronto? GTAs? Like, how do you?
London, the London, and I'm going to say talk with
Okay.
people in the Caribbean community.
Okay.
That's why I said
Yeah,
that
yeah,
first.
yeah.
I narrowed it down.
Yeah, I know. I noticed what you did. I noticed that.
Right. I can't talk about Toronto because Toronto is a different animal.
Yeah, yeah.
Living there, I remember, like I said, I think I mentioned before with you that I had the privilege of speaking with Bob Ray when he was NDP, right?
Well, I just want to say the NDP, certainly in 2018, we elected 40 members to Queen's Park. And for the first time in Ontario's electoral history, we had enough members in our caucus to create a black caucus. So we created
That's
the
amazing.
first black caucus ever in the Ontario legislature. We had 5 black MPPs who were elected as New Democrats. And we have worked incredibly hard those members of the Black Caucus worked incredibly hard. And as an NDP caucus, we also worked very hard to strengthen the relationships with black communities. In this election, we have, I think it's almost 2/3 of the candidates, the 124 candidates we have who are running, are what we call equity candidates. So they're black candidates, they're women, they're BIPOC, they're indigenous. So we understand the importance of making sure that a legislature, the composition of the legislature reflects the reality of the people that we are representing.
Representation does matter. So I totally agree with that. But then I'm going to push back though. So representation matters, but then even having these colorful faces, I'll say, and of the spectrum, are people actually, when they're sitting at the table, are they actually being listened at the table? So there's a lot of tokenism, and there's a lot of like the idea of the glass ceiling for the BIPOC community and what have you. So having this representation is great, but then how does the NDP or any political platform, how do they become intentional when they are supporting their colleagues of color, and how are they not tokenized? Because a lot of times, again, tokenism happens. Like you have them, it's great that you have all these people, right? But then if they're at the table, but no one's listening to them, and then the person up is still doing whatever they want to continue the status quo, how does that really support the changes? So what are your thoughts about that?
Well, I think that's an incredibly important point, that you don't want to. This is not about, you know, putting people in those
Boxes. I don't want. I always see in any type of system, they're always checking the boxes, and then they think they check the box, and then it becomes a superficial, a performative way of just having representation. But then it's just not having the narrative, the voices, the experiences, and addressing the various intersectionalities that you have within your community. So just want to make sure that having, like, this first time hearing that you have a Black caucus, so it'd be interesting to see what they are doing and what their experience is and how they can be role models for the next generation about their experiences and their journey to get into the NDP. Because again, there aren't very many people that look like me or us that's part of that. So how was that? It would be interesting to interview them, to be honest, because to see where their journey is and how do they actually come and go from there. That's for me.
And it still gets back to my point when I said, especially when you look at London, Ontario, and NDP presence. I know Dirk on a different level she has, right? But when having a studio, first of all, I have DJs that come into the studio. You know, we have these conversations and around music and all this stuff. NDP is not a party that gets mentioned in these conversations, right? It's almost as, yes, you've made that in-depth in Toronto, which is fine because, you know, given the numbers. But how do you make that same progress outside in communities such as London with a small, you know, smaller Black community as well? How do you make it? And do you actually want to make it in these communities?
We absolutely,
Obviously.
we absolutely want to.
I think they want to, but my question would be how?
How? Yeah, how?
Right?
Well, this is one way. This is one way, and I really appreciate. I welcomed this opportunity to participate in this podcast and through you can try to make those connections with the Black community. It means it's very important to me, and it should be important to anyone who wants to serve in an elected role, that they understand that they have those relationships with the communities that they are supposed to represent. I also want to say with the NDP, so I don't know what's going to happen on June 2nd. I don't know what our caucus is going to look like. I don't know if we're going to if we will have elected enough Black members to continue a Black caucus, but we did just prior to the election, for the first time in our party's history, we have a Black president of the Ontario NDP, a Black woman. This is not just something that we did, you know, from 2018 to 2022. This is an ongoing priority. And the Black Caucus also held a session. Now it was during COVID, so it had to be online, but a session for Black people who were interested in thinking about becoming a candidate, either in this election or at a future election.
And then, to go back to what Melissa said, how do we make that progress in terms of getting that message out there? Because this is the first time we both have heard it. And that's why I talk about being in London. That's why I talk about London, Ontario, and I didn't go anywhere else and said, well, you know, we don't turn out to vote in that number, and we don't identify with the NDP, because having had this, here we are in London, Ontario, and I'm saying this is the first time we've heard about it. That message needs to be
promoted.
Yeah, you guys are not, no one's being transparent about the different programs, and I think that's where it is. We know the why, we need to have representation. We know the why, that we need to hear the voices to make change and support all Ontario, you know, community members. However, it's the idea of the how, and how's this information being shared? Because again, it's almost like everybody's working in a siloed element, right? And then we only hear anything is from, you know, when there is a campaign for 3-4 weeks, and then everything becomes silent, and then we're waiting, you know, to see what happens through the media about whatever bill or whatever policies that are being addressed, right? So where is that transparency where we, you know, community members are in the know about the process, in the know? So then again, having, you know, a meeting, a Zoom meeting or what have you, to you know, to encourage, you know, marginalized people or people of color to, you know, get into politics. It should also be before that.
Yeah.
Like, how do we start like, how do we have, like, right now we have 2 young black men in this room. How do we start them to, you know, to have these questions, to see them as, you know, future voters or future politicians? So where do we start? Is the generation, like, how do we, the whole thing is how do we encourage, how are we transparent, and then how do we support this knowledge for future leadership for members in the marginalized communities?
So I'm gonna come to you. I'm gonna answer that question.
Sorry, brothers, for putting you on the spot.
For a little bit. How I found out about Peggy, right? Because one of the things that Peggy was doing was, I remember the BSA had something, and there she was, and she was saying congratulations to the BSA.
Perfect.
We had the Essence and Culture Awards,
Yes.
and she was there saying congratulations to our group for having the Essence and Culture Awards. So likewise, when this came up, she was the first candidate that we actually asked to come on our show, and here she is.
Right.
So I can see in her, in her message and what she's doing.
Yeah,
That
her actions speak
her
more than
actions
what she's
speak.
saying, because she's
And that-
actually it's
right.
the act of
So
the work.
then I'm going to get back to the black, to the, you know, the black and the membership. They need to spread that message in the same way that Peggy did it, because Peggy's out there. That's why she's on this show.
Yeah, exactly.
So
So where are the other ones?
We're the other ones, right? It's like I said, it's not by coincidence or accident, or we just pulled the name out of the hat. This is in relation to the work that I saw you doing out there. I'm on Facebook sometimes, and I see that I'm seeing Peggy, and she's sending out this stuff, and I see her, and I looked at her campaign, and I think there's a couple people out that's canvassing for her as well.
Yeah.
So I've seen.
Yeah.
So I've
You've been
seen it.
busy, yeah.
So I've seen it. Now, how do you get that message on a broader scale? Because
How do you
like
share that with your NDP
Colleagues.
colleagues in the
Yeah.
future? Like,
Yeah.
how is that gonna, how do you communicate, like, sharing, not just you, but being present and accessing the community and being transparent again, right?
I got this young man that is in my studio. I'm actually going to call him out for a minute. His name is DJ Jose.
Okay.
His actual name is Jose. And he's one of those people that's actively looking to see how to support and how to get involved in politics. So we have these conversations. And I said to him tonight, you know, I want you to listen in, because this is a conversation he needs to hear, because, you know, I'm not sure what he's voting, and I never asked who he's voting for. We've talked about the overall effect of liberals who have, you know, they've got that name recognition, right? And, you know, we talk a little bit about PCs, and we talk about NDPs, and it's like, okay, he's not up to speed in terms of name recognition as it should be. So once again, like, we're always going to get into the message. Now, there are a couple of things that I wanted to talk to you about, and I know you know, I looked at your, I'm always on her,
Well, that's-
our platform. I'm supposed to be doing my homework. Sometimes I actually do my homework. One of the things that you were for was bullying. You were a part
Against bullying, not
Sorry. Here I go. For bullying. Thank you.
She was for against bullying.
Yes, people. For against.
Tongue twister.
For against bullying.
Yeah.
Against bullying.
Yeah.
I was reading something on your campaign about that. I think you were with, it was you and someone else, I believe. I'm trying to find it. And I looked at it this morning. And where is it? It's, is it the press releases? Let me see if I find it.
Why don't you just ask her?
Yeah, I was trying to remember what that would have
Yeah,
been.
it's, I think I found where, I think it's through the,
I certainly, as a school board trustee, this
Yes.
was something that I was actively involved in, with safe schools policies and making sure that all students had a safe place to learn, and this is something that I have continued to champion as an MPP. We need to have a province that where everyone feels safe. You know, just before I came here, I was at the mosque, and we were talking about the bill that the Ontario NDP worked on with the National Council of Canadian Muslims called Our London Family Act. That bill set out a number of concrete measures to address not just Islamophobia, but racism, white supremacy, organized hate in this province. And the actions that were proposed in that bill, which the Ford government decided not to move forward on, but that they would make a big difference for the Black community as well. And many Black, members of the Black community are also Muslims, so they face those, the double discrimination of Islamophobia and anti-Black racism. But yeah, that is something that I have always been passionate about, school board trustee and MPP.
And I like the fact that you mentioned the other elements of, racism and the phobias. Because a lot of times when people say bullying, it has a negative connotation, and that just has is almost lighthearted in a sense that bullying, there's so many different elements of bullying. So for myself, growing up in London, I can say that I was bullied, but my bullying that I've experienced was all racism.
Yeah.
Right? So it wasn't bullying, it was all racism and discrimination that I've, experienced at the playground or what have you, by the names being called and what have you. So how do we ensure to have a distinction, or how do we have a distinction of understanding what's the difference between bullying and racism or discrimination and what have you? And how do we also teach educators to understand their biases, that they're not also reiterating the idea of what bullying looks like to them, right? Because some people will have a blind eye. Such as microaggressions and those elements, a lot of people will not really know what to say, or would just actually ignore it.
Yeah,
or pretend it didn't happen.
I loved at the Black Love event when Sadat was quoting Jay-Z.
Yes,
said, you can't heal what you don't reveal.
Yes.
And so understanding, and to say bullying, it lets a lot of people off the hook.
Yeah,
because
it's negative.
I never say anything mean.
Right.
I never engage in bullying, but it lets them off the hook because it denies the reality that there are deeply rooted systemic barriers that Black people face on a daily basis that are more damaging than an act of bullying. In many cases, they perpetuate some of the challenges that Black people face daily in housing and in employment and in health. I mean, for goodness sake, we saw in this 2 years of the biggest global health emergency that we have ever faced. Who experienced the worst outcomes? It's BIPOC people. It's Black people, and that was well documented both across the province and in London, the Middlesex London Health Unit.
I'm gonna hold you for a second because that means there's somebody on the line. Did you? Welcome to Real Talk, Straight Talk. Who am I speaking with?
Hello.
Yes.
Yes. I have a question.
Yeah, what's your question, please?
Okay, so I want to thank Ms. Peggy Sadler for coming on the show. I have followed her since I moved to London, and I think she's doing an amazing job.
Oh.
And I wanted to ask her, my question is about unemployment, Black and minority unemployment in London. Now, the recent statistics from Statistics Canada are indicating about a 17% unemployment for Black people. I'm not sure what the numbers are in the province, but that is 7% higher than other visible minority groups. And what I found very startling about the report from Statistics Canada is that it says Black Canadians within the age of 25 to 55 years old hold at least a bachelor's degree, but they still have a lower unemployment rate. Now, Peggy, I'm not sure what the numbers are in London, but I would like for you to tell us, what is it that you're doing to mitigate unemployment for Black people and for other minority groups here in London? Because we know many companies, even government agencies, will state that they're equal employment opportunity companies, but Black people have been applying and applying and applying, and they don't get a call back. And usually it discourages people, and this could possibly lead youth into crime, violence, and other stuff.
Yeah, well, during this election, one of the commitments that the NDP has made as part of our platform is to take a whole of government approach on an anti-racism strategy for this province. And a whole of government approach means identifying and developing, a plan to deal with the racism and discrimination that Black people and Asian and Indigenous and others face in employment, in housing, in healthcare. All of these areas of our society and of our economy. So there was an anti-racism directorate that was created under the previous government, has been very poorly funded, neglected under the Conservative government. We would commit to having a minister responsible for anti-racism who would work with all of those other ministries to make sure that on jobs and employment that we are recognizing the much lower rates of employment or higher rates of unemployment for Black people, and in particular Black youth, and come up with strategies to address that. We've also committed to a focused Black small business support because we know that Black-owned businesses were in many cases were harder hit because they tend to be smaller. A lot of times they're women-owned as well. And they are facing a much longer road to recover from COVID-19 than many other businesses. And in some areas of Toronto, like Little Jamaica,
Peggy, if I may interrupt or interject a little bit.
Sure.
I know you mentioned about putting a minister, and that is commendable. I think that will be a good step. But the part of your response that I have a problem with is doing a study, because there have been numerous studies out of the University of Toronto, out of York University, that really details the issues that we face in the education system and in the economic environment. So I don't necessarily think we need to do another study. What we really want is action. And as I said previously, most people from our community, like myself, we're not looking for handouts. We're going to school, we're getting ourselves qualified, and we want to be counted man to man, woman to woman. When we're looking for these jobs, that we get an opportunity. I really don't think the answer lies in commissioning another study. Yeah, I'm not going to take up any more of your time. I'm going to listen to your response because I know there might be other callers. My name is Omar Smith, and thank you for speaking to me. Omar. I'll await your response.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'm sorry if you thought I was saying we should commission another study. What I meant to say is that there is all of this data that supports, that proves the discrimination that Black people experience. So we have to look at that and use that to plan how to move forward. Is it particular sectors of employment that Black people are underrepresented? Understanding what the barriers are is the first step to be able to dismantle those barriers and move forward to ensure that there is that equity that we want to create.
I'm gonna ask, along with, and I gotta say, it's not just Omar. He's also Professor Omar Smith, and he's always been one of our panel members. So I'm glad to have him do that. When I go, as we talk about the job scenario, and I go to the NDP's page and the platform page, and we talk about, I know you talk about the minorities and racialized people, but when I look at it, I don't see anything that actually addresses it in that aspect. I'm hearing it from you, but if I go to the page and I look at this page right now, it doesn't show it in the way that you're addressing it. So what's the discrepancy? Because I'm hearing it from you, and I know, like I said, I've known you to what you, I've followed you as well, see what you're doing. But it's one thing for you to say it, but if your party saying the same thing on a scale, and if it's said, it should be where a person such as myself, a racialized person or minority, should be able to go look and say, okay, here it is right here.
Yeah, I agree, and this is good feedback.
No, it's good feedback.
Yeah, very good feedback. Because, I mean, for our jobs and our jobs platform, much of it focuses back to where we started on Employment Standards Act. So it is increasing the minimum wage. It is ensuring paid sick days. It's bringing gig and contract workers under the Employment Standards Act.
Okay, but I'm going to interject right now. I'm going to go back to what Professor Omar mentioned, because he mentioned people of color who have a bachelor's degree, and then how, again, they're not getting jobs, and then also representation. So for example, like, I'm an educator for Thames Valley School Board, and I probably could say there's a handful of, Black teachers that are there. So we're looking about the representation, but also too, what other, so how do we support, like in the healthcare sector, how do we support, representation and people actually getting jobs who actually have a degree? So a lot of times we focus, I feel like sometimes people make it an assumption of when they see marginalized and racialized, it is part of the lower socioeconomic element. But now we got to look at also too, like the middle class who do have a degree, where the lower class, marginalized, Black community or whomever, saved their dollars, did their sacrifices and so on to make the next generation be able to get a degree, and then they're still not getting those jobs. So where's that data, and where's the voices of the people who are getting a graduate degree or having a degree and still being overlooked? And where's the accountability for organizations or various systems such as education, because as government pays for that, or we pay for that, or the healthcare system, we pay for that. So how come there isn't any representation and people not be able to get jobs? So yeah, we always focus on the marginalized and the lower socioeconomic, but again, we need to focus on the middle class who's also being dinged and also not getting the support that they need. And because again, if they're not getting the support, you're pushing them back down.
Yeah.
I'm gonna hold on for a second because we got another call. Welcome to Real Talk Straight Talk. Who am I speaking with?
Pastor Thomas.
How are you doing?
Oh, I'm blessed. How are you?
I'm very good. Thought for the day?
Yes. I'm all about the youth, and I just wanted to ask a question. Thank you, Peggy, for coming on. I really appreciate you and the work that you've done for the community for many, many years. I have followed you and the work that you've done. One of the questions I had to ask is regards to, I heard you mention about the lack or the jobs that the youth are not able to have, or the Blacks are not able to, we're not able to find, or one of my questions I wanted to ask is, how do we create more jobs for our youth within this city?
Well, one of the things that I have been that's been another passion of mine is referred to as work integrated learning, and this is these are co-ops, internships, these kinds of hands-on work opportunities that young people get through the school system. Could be secondary school, oftentimes it's post-secondary, and our platform actually includes a commitment to double the number of paid work integrated learning opportunities that are available to young people, because that provides that pathway for a lot of, in particular, for a lot of racialized young people who are studying in post-secondary, to get that leg into, or foot into the door of the labor market. And it's proven that often those, the companies that bring those young people in invest in training them during that work integrated learning opportunity, and they hire them afterwards. It's a great pipeline. So that, expanding work integrated learning throughout post-secondary sector. For the first time, I have a high school co-op student in my office. I involve as many students as I can in my office as MPP, but that is, I think that holds a lot of promise, in particular for racialized young people. If we can engage more companies in providing those options for young people, work closely with the school boards and with the post-secondary institutions, and the government has a role in providing financial support, paying those young people for their labor, and supporting the companies to do the supervision and training and etc. But that would be one way. That's one idea that would help get more Black youth into the labor market.
I thank you for that. I like when you said that it will be paid.
Yeah. Yes.
I was hesitant when I heard it co-op, because a lot of times co-op is something that's not paid, and within our community, our youth can't afford to work without being paid. So I'm so glad that they've integrated that within the platform, to have it that they will receive remuneration. So that's really good.
Yeah, and
Thank you so much.
You've made such an important point, because that has been historically a barrier for Black youth to participate in those programs, because if they have to fund it themselves, or they might have to give up a part-time job that they're already working in order to do this, take advantage of this opportunity. So no, we need to make sure that those work integrated learning opportunities are paid for students.
And when would that roll out, or is that something that you're still looking into, or is that something that
we've proposed it in our platform? We had it in our platform in the last election, and we continue to push this at Queen's Park. So whoever forms government on June 2nd, this is something that we will continue to advocate for, to get the government to provide more of these, so that more young people across this province can participate.
Thank you so much. I appreciate you. Have a great night.
Thank you.
Now, my guys have looked at me and told me that I've got under 10 minutes left. They're great at trying to keep me on time, or on track, as I should say. As we get to the final stages of this conversation, I want to talk about the actual process of getting involved in politics, and how do we encourage our young. I know Melissa talked about it earlier, but I want you to actually take me through some of the process, some of the things that you did. You alluded to them earlier, how, from being on the school board and all that stuff. Let's say I've got these young guys right here. How do we get them?
Or the steps and what?
The steps.
Yeah, the steps and like various, what are the various pathways? Various pathways for students to become a politician, or become involved in politics. What would you recommend advice?
Well,
for the next generation?
yeah, volunteer in a campaign. So
there you
we
go.
have a provincial election going on right now. It's only 9 more days, but there will be a municipal election in the fall. After that, there'll be a bit of a gap until we have the next federal election. But whenever there is a campaign, that's how I first got involved myself with the NDP. Was just I showed up in a campaign. I said I was too shy to talk to anybody, but I would stuff envelopes.
Okay.
And so then they kind of encouraged me, and then I discovered I really liked talking to people and hearing what they telling me about their lives. And so, but that's always a great way is to volunteer.
Like it.
And then one of the things that I do, and I know a lot of elected people also feel very strongly about this. I had a youth cabinet. I suspended it during COVID, but many of us in elected office want to provide that mentorship for young people so that they can learn about what an MPP does. It kind of gave me a sounding board for to hear from young people. I would share what we were talking about at Queen's Park and get their feedback on different debates or legislation that was being considered. But look for those opportunities too when there's any kind of youth advisory council or youth committee. That's also a great way for young people to meet as somebody who's in elected office and learn a bit about the role of an elected representative.
And then, so as a role as an MPP, what does a regular week look like?
Or a day.
Is it an 8-hour day? Is it a 6-hour day? Is it a 40-hour week? What does a week look like for an MPP?
It's a very full job, and then the part of it, you do half your job in the community and half your job at Queen's Park. When you are in the community, in the constituency office, it's meeting with individual constituents as well as organizations that serve the community, so you can understand their perspective on what they need from government. And then it's attending community events. Because it's really important that people see you out there. Yeah, and people need to see you out there and need to know that you want to connect with them, you want to hear from them, you want to be accessible. So that's really, really important. And so I pack my weekends. I'm so glad that we're through COVID and we're back to in-person events. And you and I talked in February when it was all still a little bit.
I invited her to she said,
not sure.
And next year, if you have it.
Absolutely.
So I'm holding you to next year. We're going to be starting that up shortly.
Good.
Long planning season. So I'm looking for you for next year, regardless of whether you're not, if you're in, which we hope you're, wish you good luck in the elections. But whether or not we're still gonna look for you.
Okay.
Now, in terms of a year or even a month, how much time do you have to spend at Queen's Park? What's the breakdown? Is it let's say in a month? Is it 20 days at Queen's Park, 10 days here?
So Queen's Park sits Monday through Thursday. Okay. Fridays we're always back at the constituency office. We meet 3 weeks out of every month. So each month there is a constituency week, it's called, where you're in your riding the entire week. And then we meet about 7 months of the year. So we don't meet in July and August. We only meet beginning of December, and then we come back kind of mid-February. So that's the way the parliamentary calendar works.
Okay. Any questions?
I have a lot more questions, but I know, I got caught up with I want to say thank you for being here. But just the idea of work internship and supporting students and we need to stop the idea of the concept of free labor, because that's another concept of if you want to go deeper, but I'm not going to go there. But the idea of having students, be able to still get a credit, still get a course, and still, because again, and support them with their finances. I think that's a great idea for that. But I just want to say thank you, and also I appreciate you shedding light on the various policies that you've been a part of, and also future policies and changes that you want to do to encourage equitable opportunities for many people that need it. And I think that's a huge highlight that I'm walking away from our conversation today. So I want to say thank you for that.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. And I want to focus on getting the message out. I don't want to have these meetings to hear about the Black Caucus. I don't want to hear about certain things. I want to get that. I want to see that message being spread. So it's.
But then that's what. But I'm going to push back now again. I'm always a devil's advocate. I'm going to push back. That's on us, though.
Yes.
That's on us. That's us as the parents. We're talking about what they're going to be doing for our kids, but what are we doing in the community to get that information so we can share that information to the kids? So where's the accountability now? I'm putting it back on me. Where's accountability for me to volunteer, for me to actually have a one-on-one conversation with other parliament members or what have you? So again, the accountability, we're talking about the kids, we're talking about the systems, but now where is the accountability as us adults with children, and what are we doing? Because we can't rely on everybody else to raise our kids. I know it takes a village to raise a child and whatever, but we need to become understanding, because again, as when we're growing up, we didn't really know much about politics. And again, now where do we take our biases and where do we put our, check that at the door, and where do we start to volunteer? Where do we start to, understand what's going on, so then we don't have these conversations, these one-off conversations, and not sharing that.
I think there's
we need to do something.
I think there's certain set of information that's got to be out there so that the parents can get it as well too.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm not saying I'm not saying that we
but
can't
get
be
the information, but also do something with it.
But we still got to get the information first. That's all where I'm going first. We get the information, and then now we go back, and if our parents, and if we as parents and are not doing something with it, that's another issue. I just want to see the information first get out there. Like I said, a Black Caucus should be out there in that sense.
Right. But there should be a page on it.
That's where I'm going.
We should know what they look like.
I'm not, you know what?
We should be following them on Instagram and Twitter. We need to represent Black Twitter.
That's where I'm going first. I want to see it out there. I want to display so that a parent doesn't have to go and literally have to spend 15, 20 minutes just trying to dig to find that it's out there.
It should be transparent and accessible, that we know who the members represent, you, your team, your party, but then also who represents the community.
And it's great that Peggy said it, but I want to see one of our own say, "Hey, there's a Black Caucus out there."
I know.
I really,
we need maybe that's who you should basically bring on the platform.
Now I have to go and find it to bring it up.
Well, Laura May Lindo was the chair of our Black Caucus.
Okay.
She's the member for Kitchener, or she was. She's the candidate
now.
NDP candidate for Kitchener Centre.
That's good to know.
Yeah. So hopefully she will be re-elected and will again be the chair of the NDP's next Black Caucus.
Okay.
So, yeah.
We continue the series next week. We've got,
we do?
Yes, we do. We've actually got two other guests that I believe are coming on.
Okay.
I'm not going to call any names because
it's a surprise, folks.
Not even a surprise. Tomorrow the names will be out.
Okay,
Tomorrow the names will be out. So I just got to make sure, get everything confirmed.
Yes.
Peggy, thank you so much. Like I said, it wasn't an accident that we reached out to you first. It was based on the work that we've seen you do. Keep up the good work. Good luck. And once again, thank you for being a part of the podcast. I want to thank all our sponsors. Let me try to get them. I didn't mention Pride. Big shouts to Kevin and the whole crew over at Pride. Want to thank Natalie over at RBC. Of course, the Wien Community Center. Angel, thank you for the space. I'm going to wave to Angel right now. Thank you, Angel. Angel is also part of our podcast. She says, "Politics, Colin, leave me out of it."
I know that she laughed at me walking in here.
She's like, you go with him on this. You go with him.
You're it.
Want to thank the guys. You just don't want to speak on it. And people, that's Angel in the background. That's as much as she wants to say on politics. Got to say a big shout out to the guys over at Paranite Bar and Grill, to the ladies of Ollie Commercial Interior Design, to my people out in Hamilton who follow us and who give us a big push. It's Soul Kitchen Radio. We even got some people out in Ottawa. Rhythm Movements Community Association and Flow Seniors in Ottawa. Once again, thank you to all our sponsors. And the last, I almost forgot, Irie Market.
Oh, yes.
Irie Market, they
Opened last
just
week.
opened. They just opened
Where?
last week.
Where is it?
Kips Lane.
Okay.
Kips Lane, another West Indian market owned. We like to promote and push black businesses.
Yeah.
That's one of our focus. To all black businesses out there, we are Evo TV, evomm3.com. There is a series coming where we're going to be profiling black businesses.
Good.
And so, that'll be, I think that's going to start up in the fall. So I'm looking forward to that. Once again, thanks to everybody. Thanks to Melissa. Oh, thank you.
You're
again.
welcome.
And of course, our guest, Peggy. And to the crew, this is what we call Fade to Black.
Yes. To the crew.
Yes.
On the beat. On the beat.